Lauren Dickason was born on June 1, 1985, in Cape Town, South Africa. She was raised in a loving and supportive home, the kind where encouragement and compassion were a part of everyday life. Her parents instilled in her a deep respect for others and a passion for learning. That upbringing would shape the path she'd walk, one filled with empathy and an unwavering drive to help people. Even as a child, Lauren stood out. Her smile could light up a room, and her kindness left a lasting impression. Friends and classmates often recalled how she was always the first to lend a hand, whether it was at school or simply helping someone on the street. She wasn't just sweet, she was sharp too. While other kids played with toys, Lauren devoured medical books. Her fascination with anatomy and biology wasn't just a phase, it was a glimpse into the future she was already dreaming of. Determined to pursue a life in medicine, Lauren's passion grew stronger during her high school years. She signed up for first aid courses, and it was there that her calling became undeniable. She didn't just want to be a doctor, she needed to be one. Lauren was accepted into one of Cape Town's most prestigious universities, where she studied medicine and graduated with honors. Her hard work paid off, and she began her professional journey at a hospital in her hometown. To her colleagues, she wasn't just another doctor, she was a light. Patients loved her for her warmth, and fellow staff members admired the way she poured her heart into every case. But Lauren was never one to lose herself in work completely. She believed in balance, in building a life where career and personal joy could coexist. And in 2005, fate had something special in store. It was at a professional medical event where Lauren met Graham Dickason, an orthopedic surgeon with a calm demeanor, a good sense of humor, and a kind heart. Their connection was instant. What started as friendly conversation quickly turned into something deeper. Graham was drawn to Lauren's dedication. She, in turn, found comfort in his sincerity. By 2006, the two were married. Their wedding was a joyful celebration, surrounded by family and friends who wholeheartedly believed these two were meant for each other. Together, they dreamed of a happy home filled with love and the laughter of children, but the road to parenthood would test every fiber of their strength. Lauren went through a staggering 17 rounds of IVF with donor eggs, each cycle a roller coaster of hope and heartbreak. In 2013, the couple finally conceived. Their baby girl, Sarah, was born prematurely at just 18 weeks, and tragically, she didn't survive. The loss devastated Lauren. She stepped away from her full-time job, choosing instead to assist Graham part-time in his surgical practice. But the weight of that grief never fully lifted. It marked a turning point in her life. Then, in 2014, a miracle arrived. Their daughter, Liane, was born healthy and full of life. For Lauren and Graham, her birth brought a renewed sense of purpose. Lauren embraced motherhood with everything she had, proudly sharing stories of Liane's first steps and favorite toys with anyone who'd listen. Her joy was unmistakable. In 2018, their happiness grew even more. Lauren gave birth to twins, Karla and Maya. The house was now filled with the sound of 3 young girls, laughter, cries, and constant motion. But as beautiful as that chaos was, the reality of raising 3 small children began to take a toll. Lauren tried her best to juggle it all, while Graham, ever the supportive husband, did what he could. Still, the days were long and the nights were longer. The twins demanded constant care, while Liane, older but still just a child, needed attention and emotional support. The pressure on Lauren was building, quietly but relentlessly. In November 2018, the family made a difficult but necessary decision. They hired a nanny, Maria Mendy Sagoni, to help manage the growing responsibilities at home. For a while, things felt a little lighter. Maria worked with the family until May 2020. But what came after would change everything forever. Maria quickly became a vital part of the Dickason household. More than just a nanny, she was a much-needed helping hand in a life that was growing increasingly chaotic. With 3 young children, her presence brought a sense of structure and relief. She helped manage the day-to-day whirlwind, allowing Lauren to catch her breath, even if just for a moment. Meanwhile, Graham did his best to balance the demands of his job with being an involved father. He was loving, present when he could be, and always tried to carve out moments to play with the children or lend a hand around the house. But as an orthopedic surgeon, his long hours and high-stress responsibilities often kept him away. And the weight of it all? It continued to fall heavily on Lauren's shoulders. Still, the family made an effort to hold on to joy. They planned outings, took walks, shared holidays, and created memories when time allowed. From the outside, their life looked picture-perfect, a happy, thriving family. But behind closed doors, Lauren was quietly battling a storm no one could see coming. Lauren had been struggling with her mental health for years. In 2015, following the devastating loss of her first child, Sarah, she was diagnosed with a severe depressive episode coupled with extreme anxiety, symptoms often associated with postpartum depression. But this wasn't something she could simply move past. The trauma left deep scars. She was haunted by memories of her loss. Nights were filled with sleeplessness, her days consumed by panic attacks, tearful episodes, and thoughts she didn't dare voice aloud. She became emotionally withdrawn, her anxiety heightened, and her thoughts began spiraling in ways she couldn't control. Even after the birth of her twin daughters, the darkness didn't fade. In fact, it deepened, made worse by medical complications. Karla, one of the twins, was born with a congenital cleft palate, a condition that brought more stress, more appointments, and more sleepless nights. By May 2019, Lauren couldn't ignore what was happening inside her anymore. She reached out to a psychiatrist and confessed something that terrified her. She was having disturbing thoughts about her children. It wasn't just exhaustion, it was something far more serious. These thoughts, she said, emerged after a particularly stressful evening. She and Maria had been trying to get the twins to bed, but nothing seemed to work. Karla especially was difficult, often aggressive, even violent. Lauren described her as a child who bit, hit, and pushed boundaries relentlessly. The exhaustion was becoming unbearable. Friends and family began noticing subtle changes. Lauren grew quieter, more distant, a shadow of her once bright self. But she never opened up. She kept it all inside, wearing a mask of strength, hiding the cracks that were growing deeper with each passing day. And no one could have imagined just how much she was hiding. In 2021, the Dickason family made a bold decision, one they hoped would mark a fresh beginning. Graham had been offered a well-paying position overseas, and with that opportunity came the choice to uproot their lives and move to New Zealand. The quiet, scenic town of Timaru promised safety, peace, and a better future for their children. For Lauren, it wasn't just a move, it was a chance to start over. She envisioned herself returning to medicine, rebuilding her career, and watching her children thrive in a calm, supportive environment. It felt like a hopeful leap toward healing. The family soon settled into a cozy house in Timaru. Graham dove into his new role with focus and dedication, while Lauren took on the full-time responsibility of caring for the kids. From the outside, everything looked picture-perfect. A loving family, smiling children, laughter echoing through the halls. But beneath that surface, a silent storm was brewing. The relocation proved far more difficult than expected, especially for Lauren. Back in South Africa, she had relied heavily on the emotional support of her friends and family. But in New Zealand, that familiar comfort was gone. Graham, through his job, had opportunities to meet new people. Lauren, on the other hand, spent her days almost entirely within the walls of their home, isolated and overwhelmed. Her daily life became a relentless cycle of caretaking. Liane, their eldest at 6, had started school, which brought its own responsibilities. The twins, Karla and Maya, just 2 years old, demanded constant attention. Lauren's days were a blur: school drop-offs, toddler tantrums, cooking, cleaning, playtime, bedtime, and then repeating it all again the next day. In this non-stop routine, Lauren began to disappear, not physically, but emotionally. She had no time to rest, no energy for hobbies, no moment to herself. The fatigue wasn't just physical, it was emotional, and it was growing deeper. In July, a friend sent her a TikTok video, a simple poem titled, "Mom Needs a Minute." It was about the chaos and exhaustion of motherhood. Lauren's response was brief but telling. "Amazing. That's how I feel." And she meant every word. Lauren had been battling depression for years, long before the move. Back in South Africa, she had seen a therapist and was on medication that helped stabilize her mood. But by late 2020, she began to feel better. In March 2021, without speaking to her doctor, she stopped taking her antidepressants. At first, things seemed manageable, but by August, her anxiety returned, heavier and more intrusive. She quietly resumed her medication, but the damage was already taking root. Life in Timaru wasn't what she had hoped for. The cultural differences left her feeling disconnected. Their rental home, small, cramped, and uncomfortable, didn't feel like a sanctuary, and new fears began to creep into her mind. Fears about the future her children would face. She worried they might become victims of cyberbullying. She even began drawing unsettling comparisons between how New Zealand treated its indigenous Maori population and the apartheid she had witnessed back in South Africa. These thoughts didn't fade, they festered, and soon they began to twist into something darker. What started as concern slowly grew into delusion, thoughts distorted and magnified by the shadows of her depression. Lauren was slowly disappearing into herself. With each passing day, she grew quieter, more distant, even from those who loved her most. Her thoughts, once open and shared, became locked away behind tired eyes and forced smiles. The weight of isolation pressed down on her, and the anxiety she carried began stealing joy from the moments that once brought her comfort. Even time with her children no longer offered escape. Dark thoughts crept in where laughter used to live, and though Graham loved her deeply and stood by her side, he too was navigating his own challenges. His new job demanded long hours and total focus. Often he'd return home late, physically present, but drained and weary. Still, he tried. He carved out time to be with the family whenever he could. But the spark they once shared, the easy closeness, had started to fade. The long conversations, the simple intimacy, they were replaced with silence. Graham noticed Lauren's growing sadness, but convinced himself it was temporary, just an adjustment period. He believed time would heal what the move had unsettled. Their love hadn't vanished, but something unspoken had begun to grow between them, a quiet, aching distance neither of them fully knew how to bridge. Then came September 16th, 2021, a day that began like any other. That morning, Lauren took 6-year-old Liane to school, while the twins, Karla and Maya, were dropped off at kindergarten. Graham left for work, unaware that the events of the next few hours would unravel their entire world. The day passed in the usual rhythm of chores and errands, but by afternoon, Lauren had made a plan, a simple one. She picked up the girls early, thinking they could enjoy the fresh air and sunshine at the local botanical garden, a small break in routine, a peaceful walk, maybe even a moment of lightness. At the park, Liane dashed toward the playground, her laughter echoing as she climbed the slide and pumped her legs on the swing. The twins chased each other through the grass, tumbling and giggling as only toddlers can. Lauren sat nearby on a bench, phone in hand, capturing little memories in photographs. But while the camera clicked, her mind drifted. Her gaze grew unfocused. And as the children played, something inside her was quietly breaking. During their walk that day, something happened that sent a chill down Lauren's spine. She allegedly noticed a young boy taking photos of her daughters. The sight disturbed her deeply. In that moment, her fears came rushing back, fears she thought she had left behind in South Africa. Suddenly, Timaru no longer felt safe. To Lauren, this quiet new life began to look just as dangerous as the one she had tried so hard to escape. When she returned home, she followed the usual routine, cooking dinner, picking up toys, helping the girls get ready for bed. On the surface, it was a normal evening, but her mind wouldn't settle. The dark thoughts that had been building for months refused to let her go. Meanwhile, Graham was out at a pre-planned dinner with colleagues. At one point, he stepped away to call home. Lauren answered. Her voice was calm. She wished him a good evening and ended the call with a phrase that now feels haunting. "We're coping here." Later that night, around 10:30 p.m., Graham returned home. The house was oddly quiet, but the lights were still on in several rooms. Normally, the kids would already be asleep by then, and Lauren would still be up, unwinding from the day. But something felt off. He called out her name. Once, twice, no response. A strange tension hung in the air. Uneasy, Graham walked from room to room, searching. Then he stepped into the children's bedroom, and everything stopped. The girls were lying in their beds, motionless. pale, their bodies cold to the touch. At first, he didn't want to believe what he was seeing. He called their names, shook them gently, begging them to wake up. Nothing. Panic took over. Graham grabbed his phone and called emergency services, his voice trembling with fear. He tried to explain, desperate and disoriented. "My children aren't moving. They're not breathing. Please come quickly." While waiting for help, Graham did everything he could to save them. He attempted CPR, first aid, anything that might bring them back, but the girls never stirred. Those moments, filled with helplessness, would become the most agonizing minutes of his life. When the paramedics arrived, they took over instantly. Resuscitation efforts began, but it was already too late. Liane, Karla, and Maya were gone. The shock was overwhelming, not just for Graham, but for the seasoned medics too. Even in a profession where tragedy is routine, this scene left them shaken. Then came another discovery, one that deepened the horror. Lauren was found collapsed on the kitchen floor. Empty pill bottles lay beside her. Her skin was pale, her breathing faint. She was still alive, but only barely. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital, where a team of specialists worked through the night to stabilize her. Her condition was critical, but she survived. Back at the house, Graham remained frozen in disbelief. His world, once so stable, so ordinary, had shattered in a matter of hours. "I was only gone for a few hours," he told the police. "Everything was fine when I called." His voice trembled as he repeated it, trying to make sense of something that felt unimaginable. What had happened? Why were the children, who had been laughing and playing in the garden just hours earlier, now lifeless? And what had Lauren done, or experienced, to bring her to this point? The heartbreaking events of September 16, 2021, marked the beginning of a devastating investigation. The quiet town of Timaru would never be the same, and the Dickason family's tragedy had only just begun to unravel. Every detail mattered. At first glance, the house appeared ordinary, clean, calm, even comforting. The children's rooms were spotless, toys lay neatly in place, beds carefully made, as if nothing had ever gone wrong. But that illusion quickly shattered. In the kitchen, among the haunting silence, investigators discovered more than just an eerie stillness. Empty pill packets littered the counters, and next to them, handwritten suicide notes from Lauren. They were devastating. In those letters, Lauren poured out her soul, raw expressions of guilt, despair, and a chilling desire to leave this world, but not alone. She spoke of taking her children with her, believing in some twisted way that it was the only path left. These letters would become key evidence, proof of her mental collapse and intent. But the horror didn't end there. Inside the garage, police found cable ties. Forensic experts later confirmed they were used during the crime. It was a stomach-turning discovery that suggested Lauren's actions were not impulsive, but planned, methodical. As detectives pieced together the evidence inside the family home, Lauren lay in a hospital bed, alive but weak. Her body had been pushed to the brink by a drug overdose, and now she was under constant watch, guarded round the clock. Doctors worked to stabilize her condition, but even as her body recovered, her mind was clearly fractured. Initially, Lauren wouldn't speak. She remained silent, trapped in a haze of shock. Psychologists quickly recognized signs of extreme stress and deep depression. Still, investigators were determined to find answers that only she could give. And then came Graham, the only surviving member of the Dickason family. He became a crucial witness, offering painful insight into their life before the tragedy. Graham opened up about their recent move, the heavy emotional toll it took on Lauren, and the overwhelming struggles she faced caring for their 3 young daughters. "She was tired," he confessed. "She talked about how hard it was. But I never imagined this. She loved those girls. She was an amazing mother. I just thought it was temporary. I thought she'd be okay." But Lauren's own writings told a different story. Her suicide notes revealed a woman drowning in hopelessness. After the move, her loneliness grew unbearable. She wrote about guilt for not being the mother she wanted to be, and worst of all, she believed ending their lives was an act of mercy. It was a devastating insight into her mindset, and one that shocked the entire country. To confirm what happened that night, pathologists performed autopsies on the 3 children. The results were grim. All 3 had died from asphyxiation. Medical experts noted that the injuries occurred under conditions where the children couldn't resist, aligning tragically with Lauren's account. These reports left little doubt. Despite her mental state, Lauren had acted deliberately. This would become a cornerstone for the prosecution. As the dust settled from the events of September 16, 2021, Lauren, still under strict medical supervision at Timaru Hospital, slowly began to recover. The overdose hadn't claimed her life, but what lay ahead would test her in unimaginable ways. A few days later, doctors determined she was finally stable enough to communicate, and with that, the time had come. Police prepared for the official interrogation. 2 officers entered her hospital room with a dual purpose: to ask the most painful questions imaginable, and to formally place her under arrest. Lauren sat hunched on the bed, her face pale, eyes hollow. She nervously fidgeted with the edge of her blanket, the silence between them unbearably heavy. The officers sat down and began to speak. What they were about to say would change everything. One of the officers leaned in gently, his voice calm and deliberate. "Lauren," he said softly, "we know this is an incredibly difficult time for you, but we need to talk about what happened that night. It's important." Lauren didn't respond right away. Her eyes stayed fixed on the hospital blanket in her lap, her fingers nervously tugging at its edges. The room hung in heavy silence until the officers mentioned her daughters. That's when everything in her expression shifted. Her face crumpled with pain as tears spilled down her cheeks. Her body began to shake. I didn't mean it," she choked out, sobbing. "I love my girls." The officers kept their tone soft, asking questions without pressure, letting her speak at her own pace. Slowly, Lauren began to open up. She admitted that she had been feeling completely overwhelmed, mentally and emotionally drained. That day, in particular, had pushed her to the edge. "They were so loud," she said, still crying. "Jumping, shouting, throwing things. I tried to calm them, but it just made them louder." Her voice wavered as she described how it all spiraled. Her emotions, she said, had taken control. "It was like I was trapped, like this black hole just swallowed me," she whispered, barely audible. Then came the hardest part. Through trembling breaths, Lauren admitted what investigators feared. Her actions that night hadn't been premeditated. They were a result of a breaking point, a moment where her exhaustion became unbearable. "It just happened," she said. "I couldn't take it anymore." But even in her confession, there was one haunting truth. She never stopped loving her children, and that made what came next even harder to comprehend. She sat across from the officers, her voice barely above a whisper, as she began to explain the unthinkable. Lauren recounted in painful detail how her dark thoughts spiraled into a devastating reality. After what she had done, Lauren confessed she attempted to take her own life, swallowing pills in a desperate bid to escape the nightmare she had created. "I thought, if I left with them, we'd still be together," she sobbed, her words trembling, her eyes distant and hollow. But her confession wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of what would become a haunting case that shocked the world. Moments later, officers officially arrested Lauren Dickason. She was charged with the murder of her 3 daughters. The weight of the charges seemed to crush her spirit, yet she offered no resistance. As her rights were read aloud, Lauren simply nodded, signaling she understood, even in the depths of her despair. From the hospital, she was taken directly to the police station for further questioning. The whole time she wept uncontrollably, repeating the same heartbreaking sentence, "I don't know how I could do this. They were all I had." By July 2022, the trial began, and the world turned its gaze toward the courtroom. What unfolded over the next few weeks was not just a legal battle, but a sobering discussion about mental health, the weight of parental pressure, and the silent suffering of families in crisis. But beneath all those questions, one truth remained: how do you deliver justice when the accused is also a grieving, broken mother? Relatives from both Lauren and her husband Graham's side traveled all the way from South Africa to be present in court. Though the trial was scheduled to last 3 weeks, it stretched into 4, each day revealing more gut-wrenching details than the last. The prosecution made their stance clear. They believed Lauren had killed her daughters not in a fit of madness, but in response to resentment, blaming the children for straining her marriage. But Lauren stood firm in her plea, not guilty by reason of insanity. Psychiatric evaluations revealed that she hadn't been driven by delusions or voices. There were no external commands to kill. According to Lauren, the decision had been hers alone. Investigators presented the physical evidence: suicide notes, medical records, and cable ties used during the attack. Forensic specialists confirmed the girls died of asphyxiation, and the bruising on their bodies showed signs of force. The evidence was undeniable. And yet, the prosecution's words echoed through the courtroom like a gavel strike. Despite Lauren's fragile mental state, they argued, her actions were cold and deliberate. She had a choice, they said, and she chose to carry it through to the very end. The defense countered with a much different picture: a woman drowning in despair long before tragedy struck. They shared proof that Lauren had been severely depressed, even before moving to New Zealand. According to multiple mental health professionals, her emotional collapse was years in the making. She couldn't see a way out, one expert testified. Her mind was so clouded by depression, she genuinely believed this was an act of love, not harm. The courtroom held its breath as Graham Dickason, Lauren's husband, took the stand on July 19th. His testimony spanned the entire day. He told the court how Lauren had opened up to him on at least 3 separate occasions about the terrifying thoughts in her mind. "I didn't realize how serious it was," Graham said, his voice cracking. "I thought it was just temporary. If I had known, I would have done everything to stop this." Tears welled up across the courtroom. Still, Graham did something few expected. He expressed support for his wife, urging the court to consider her mental health in their judgment. But the experts didn't all agree. While 3 psychiatrists determined that Lauren suffered from severe mental illness and could qualify for an insanity defense, 2 others, Eric Monasterio and Simone McClavey, saw it differently. They believed Lauren's motive was rooted not in madness, but in anger and fear. According to them, she may have feared her husband remarrying after her death, and another woman raising her children. The defense pointed to Lauren's extreme isolation, her overwhelming responsibilities, and the crushing pressure of raising 3 young children alone in a foreign country. These factors, they argued, painted the backdrop of a woman pushed past her breaking point. "She wasn't thinking clearly," one psychologist explained. "She was in a place so dark, so hopeless, that she truly believed this was the only path forward." After 5 intense weeks of testimony, expert debates, and emotional breakdowns, the court delivered its verdict. Lauren Dickason was found guilty of murdering her daughters. But even in that moment, the court acknowledged the storm of mental anguish that had engulfed her. Her severe depression, isolation, and deteriorating emotional state were all considered in the final sentencing. Still, no verdict could erase the questions that lingered in everyone's minds. How many signs were missed? How many cries for help went unheard? And how do you ever make sense of a tragedy like this? Lauren Dickason was sentenced to 18 years behind bars for the unthinkable, taking the lives of her own 3 daughters. According to the court's decision, she will have the right to apply for parole 6 years into her sentence, but not without a haunting legacy that will follow her for the rest of her life. As the judge read the verdict, a heavy silence filled the courtroom. His voice echoed as he spoke directly to Lauren. "Your actions have claimed the lives of 3 innocent children. This is a tragedy that has left an indelible mark, not only on your family, but on society as a whole." Yet even in this moment of judgment, the court acknowledged a painful truth. Lauren's mental state at the time could not be ignored. The circumstances surrounding her descent into darkness were complex and heartbreaking. The public's reaction? Torn. Some believed the sentence was fair, arguing that a mother who could commit such an act had to face the consequences. But others felt something deeper. They saw a woman who should have been offered long-term psychiatric care, not a prison cell. The case of Lauren Dickason quickly became one of the most controversial in recent memory. On one hand, it shined a stark light on the often ignored struggles of postpartum mental health, especially for women living in isolation after childbirth. it revealed cracks in a system that still doesn't fully understand or address the silent suffering of new mothers pushed to the edge. But on the other hand, this was about 3 innocent lives, stolen in a moment no one could take back. The heartbreak was unimaginable. The demand for justice was loud and relentless. In the end, the story of Lauren Dickason stands as a chilling reminder of how delicate the human mind can be and how easily tragedy can unfold when cries for help go unheard. It forces us to ask, how many more warning signs must be missed before we finally listen?